Welcome knitters, I'm Jana with Purl Together, and in this week's technique video I'm going to show you how to splice two yarns together using the spit splice, and it's just like it sounds. A lot of people use regular water, but you know, it's called the spit splice for a reason, and because that's what's handy, and not everybody always has a little glass of water right next to them. So we'll get to that in a moment. But the reason you might want to do this rather than doing a Russian join or simply tying a knot is because it tends to be quick and easy. And if you're using, if you're knitting Fair Isle, for example, and you're using, say, this, and you want to join them together without having to weave in the ends, there's also a technique to do that where you can make the color change land on the exact stitch that you need it to, but that takes some practice and I'm not quite there yet. Keep in mind this technique only works for 100% wool yarn that is not superwash. This won't work for yarn that has acrylic in it, so only 100% wool, not superwash. Before we get started with the technique this week, I want to give a hearty shout out and a big thank you to all of our new patrons we've had in the last several weeks. Many thanks to Nancy, Virginia, Liz, Fiona, Tammie, Connie, Tanya, Micheline, and Carol. Thanks so much for supporting the channel. They all decided to become patrons and join me over at patreon.com/Purl Together. By making a small pledge each month, they receive benefits like patron knit night, an exclusive patron Facebook group, and more. So go check it out over there at patreon.com/Purl Together, and you can see what I'm offering. If you're not able to become a patron though, that's okay. You can just click like and subscribe and give me a thumbs up. All of that is super appreciated. All right, let's get started. Here I have some 2-ply Jamieson and Smith. This is 100% Shetland wool, and I want to join it to this other color of Jamieson and Smith Shetland wool. So this is particularly handy if you're doing Fair Isle, or even if you're not and you're just knitting using the same colors. It doesn't have to be fingering, as long as you're using, as I mentioned earlier, as long as you're using 100% wool and it's not superwash, this technique will work. So you can see this is 2-ply. So what I'm going to do here is just untwist the plies, and I'm going to break off one ply, an inch or so away from the end. So I'm just going to break off one of those plies like that. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing to the other side, my other color here. Just kind of undo that about 1.5 inches in, and then just bust that off. Okay, so now I have a single ply on each of these, and I'm just going to lay these next to each other, and I'm going to fold them over so they're intertwined. Okay, so all I'm doing is crossing them over and then back on themselves so they're back to the same color. All right, but the reason I broke them off now, you can tell that I'm trying to mitigate the amount of thickness that I'll have. So that section that's 1 ply, I don't want to overlap that onto the 2-ply section. I want to keep that together so I can kind of twist that, or twist that around again. Meet this back up and twist this around again. So we're not increasing the thickness here of what we're doing. Does that make sense? Okay, so I've got the blue one twisted around again. I'll twist around the gray thread, the gray yarn, the ply around itself. And then, now you can use regular water if you want instead of spitting on it, but most of the time, you don't always have a cup of water. So I'm going to go ahead and wet this in my mouth. You probably don't need to watch that. Okay, so I've gotten this pretty damp. Now what causes felting is wetness and friction. So I'm going to lay this in my hands, and I do it kind of on the heel of my hand here, and I'm just going to rub this together really fast, and what happens is those strands will felt back together because we're using friction, agitation, and of course it gets a little warm because of the heat of your hands and the dampness. So that felts back together and splices those yarns. Look at that. Okay, can you see that? Right there is where the color changes. So that's pretty fantastic. Now you can just carry on knitting with it. Okay, I'd say that's a pretty seamless join there. That's pretty awesome. It's not an increase in thickness, and if you're knitting with that, you would never know you had joined a new skein, especially if they were the same color. If you find these videos helpful, click like and subscribe down below, give me a thumbs up, and consider becoming a patron. All right, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.